Those are clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile, baby. I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I just wanna see you smile, baby. Me look up in the sky and me can't see clear. Blue skies are gold and white lines up here. Them say it's natural, me not believe them. Them say it's vital, me not listen to them. Something strange is going on. Feel it in my heart, sensing something strong. Gotta save the future, put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it a best can. Stand around and be blind to the frost can. Taking no more, how can they relax that? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile, baby. I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I just wanna see you smile, baby. Living on earth, we must respect the earth. Human and animal, we all deserve the right to peace and opportunity. But nowadays we are trying.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for the week of September 20th, 2014. We don't have Greg Palin with us today. Greg had a few things he had to attend to, but we have Russ. We'll open up the phone lines about a quarter after and try to shine some discussion on this week's continued circus of insanity on the larger global picture. The song that introduces our show, Cry Die, it's a great song. I mean, certainly we can take it for granted and the lyrics for granted, but it's a great artist who did that. I've had the pleasure of dialoguing with him before, and always my thanks to Morgan Carey, who put that piece together. That's Mariah Carey's older brother, and Morgan's a great guy. He's done a lot for the common good. He's a very trusted friend, and I appreciate him for that work. This week we see a continued march. I'll cover a couple global issues that we all need to have on our radar, no matter what. We see the U.S. power structure spearheading the push toward World War III. And make no mistake about it, that's exactly what's happening here. And the now authorization for airstrikes in a sovereign nation is completely against international law. The airstrikes that have been authorized in Syria. And this is it's unprecedented. I mean, what if Mexico said there was some of their drug cartel in San Diego, and they're going to drop some bombs in San Diego, by the way, and didn't bother asking the U.S. government how far would that go? So we need to have it in perspective, and the mainstream media is so far beyond any semblance of truth at this point. It's beyond comprehension, and we see even with issues that relate not just to the push for World War III, which is the power structure, the Western power structure, clearly being backed into a corner. They're starting to get ever more dangerous by the day, but we see what can only be considered blatant lies now coming out. I think I mentioned last week briefly, but the recent publications that the ozone layer is recovering, and people need to think for themselves. Clearly, there's no recovery happening with the ozone layer. If you read these articles closely, they'll say, well, based on this and this and this, if this happens by 2050 or 2070, it may recover. Well, that kind of qualifying statement basically negates the whole statement. It's comparable to saying, well, if pigs did have wings, they could in fact fly, but they don't. And it's the same sort of nonsense we've been given about, the Building 7 fell down, World Trade Tower 7 fell down from couches and chairs burning the first floor. Cell phone radiation isn't bad for you. Vaccines are good for you. People need to think for themselves with all of this. And as the climate situation continues to unravel, I want to report from California again. Yet another rainstorm was completely obliterated from hitting Northern California. In fact, we had what was supposed to be a day and a half of off and on rain. We had 90 seconds of rain. 90 seconds, literally. And that rain, this is important, people can keep this observation in mind. When that rain came down, you had a little bit too much moisture for the particulates to keep scattered, and so some came down. But when this happens, when you have a heavily seeded AR, atmospheric river, in front of these storms where they spray, and if while the storm's passing over you, you get some moisture that comes down in a heavily seeded front, if you will. If you look at the precipitation as it's hitting a large puddled area, if you see what looks like rapid-fire, very uniform-sized droplets, you can just about bet that's heavily seeded rain. If the pH is in the mid to upper sixes, 6.6 in that range, you can just about be assured that is heavily seeded. Raindrops are not uniform in size naturally, but when they're heavily seeded, they are, because the condensation nucleus is dictated by the particulate size that's being sprayed. So, again, that's a telltale sign of heavy spray. What looks like very uniform rapid-fire drizzle, that's generally seeded. And the 6-month forecast I check every single day, because often from one day to the next, the weather makers who make these forecasts, again, for NOAA and National Weather Service, all those forecast models are done by Raytheon. Raytheon, of course, up to their neck in weather modification. So the weather makers do the weather, quote, forecasting, which amounts to the scheduled weather. And those 6-month forecasts can change completely from one day to the next. The entire 6 months change. And the trend that is certainly surfacing is much warmer forecasts heading into this winter than what was originally scheduled for us. I believe this is because the climate engineers' insanity is catching up to them, that these engineered cool downs, which they've just done a couple, I've outlined those recently, I'll touch on that again in a moment, but these come at the cost of a worsened overall warming. They've affected the system radically. We know we have methane spewing from the East Leptip Sea of the Arctic and many, many other places, about 560 new methane seeps along the eastern seaboard. You can only fuel this kind of fire so long before it engulfs everything, and that's beginning to happen. So what we see is this engineered snow that happened in parts of the northern tier states about a week ago, temperatures as low as 17 degrees, shot back up to the 90s. That should be a huge red flag for people. And yet it's interesting that people don't seem to be connecting the dots, even people within our movement, that they jump up and down when they see the cold. They don't seem to acknowledge that it's engineered, and then nobody pays attention when the temperatures shatter records 2 days later to the high side. So we all need to connect the dots on this. And again, a huge marker of exactly what the power structure wants us to think. Watch Weather Channel. Does Weather Channel talk about the fact that we had the tied for the warmest April on record, warmest May on record globally, warmest June on record globally, warmest August on record globally, warmest summer on record globally? These are all indisputed records. But we don't see the Weather Channel, which is owned by the Rothschilds, by the way, talking about this. They only talk about the cold aspects. They may mention it, passing here or there, but what I'm trying to point out, again, is the power structure who is behind the climate engineering, who wants the public and certain leaders around the globe to believe they can control the weather to help push other countries to join on to these programs. Their message right now is to try to confuse the population, convince them that it's cooling. And again, we need to recognize these cool downs as engineered events. In fact, some very warm temperatures are now coming to the northern tier states. They're there now, as I mentioned. They're going to continue in spots. So look at the bigger picture and try to connect the dots in a way that is looking at facts and not the fact that we all hate Al Gore, which we all do. I do, anyway. The guy has done so much to harm the common good on so many levels. His hypocrisy is beyond belief. I have no love for that guy at all, but we need to look past that. That's all I'm saying. Now, the radical weather swings will continue. Again, we're going from 17 degrees to 90 in a couple days. Something's wrong. Something's radically wrong. We've seen this before. I brought up many times. Amarillo, Texas, May 1st, 2013. 100 degrees on the ground, all-time record high, snowed the next day. Seeing a lot more of that kind of weather. And this should be a huge red flag to people that everything is being engineered at this point. They're becoming increasingly desperate. They're probably using much higher levels of chemicals to ice nucleate, which they're certainly doing. It's killing trees everywhere. It doesn't matter whether your trees are getting water or they're not getting water. They're still dying. We see the same kind of die-off all over the globe. And these chemicals, these nucleating chemicals, flash burn the foliage. They absolutely do. We have, in my area, we have date palms that are hardy to low single digits in temperature. and they were chemically flash burned with some of this ice-nucleated material at temperatures in the high 20s. I mean, it almost killed these semi-mature trees. And the chemical constituents, again, extremely powerful to cool things down the way they are. So we all need to, again, recognize the completely engineered nature of the weather. I want to mention the global march a lot of people know about coming up on March 27th. Very important day. I hope everybody gets out and joins that effort. It's important to make our voices heard. What's also important is to remember that this battle is a lot more than one day. So many people, so many activists seem to think if they show up once or twice a year, they've done their job. And we're not going to win this battle that way. And a lot of us maybe are not as completely overwhelmed by one day, because every day is a day in the fight. Every single day. That day's important, and again, I hope people make a big showing on that day. But we need to remember that this battle goes on day in, day out. We all need to try to move the ball forward day in and day out. And we can't just make ourselves feel that we've done our part by showing up once a year or twice a year. And I know everybody's busy, everybody's trying to keep their head above the waterline in many ways, but even during the course of such busy days, there's a lot we can do. If we have a flyer with us, perhaps we can pass it on to someone, maybe a DVD, or a lot of other opportunities to point out in the sky what's going on. There's a lot of ways to move the ball forward every single day. So this battle is about more than just one day. Important for people to remember that. And again, between the climate confusion caused by climate engineering and media that, for all practical purposes now, is complete lies. Not so much spun truth, it's just out-and-out lies in so many ways. And we need to consider who would want us to believe what, and what dots connect, and what appears to be a correct perspective. So, again, all of us need to try to take our compass heading every day, and there's a lot of division happening, especially with the climate, especially right now. Climate March is happening this weekend. I supplied a lot of materials to New York to bring them for George Barnes from SkyderAlert.com. George is attending that Climate March with geoengineering materials, flyers, his own DVDs, my DVDs, to try to pass them out to those activists so that people that are rightfully so screaming about the climate understand that you can't at the same time have a legitimate discussion about the climate or climate change without first and foremost discussing climate engineering. How is it possible to discuss the climate situation without addressing the single greatest factor that's skewing the climate at this point? And that's not to say that there's not a lot of other factors. As I've said many times, 100 million tons a day of CO2 in the atmosphere is a problem. Those who think it's not a problem are simply not looking at data or reality. That's all there is to it. And the climate engineering, from so many aspects, is adding to that CO2 problem. That's what a lot of people aren't considering either. When the climate engineering is causing the forest to burn to the ground, and it is, it absolutely is. In fact, that's the single greatest cause of the forest burning to the ground, climate engineering. From so many directions. The fact that it's causing drought over many of the boreal forest areas. The soils are now totally contaminated in those areas. The UV is off the charts. The foliage is contaminated with an incendiary dust. So the single greatest cause, mathematically, scientifically, with the forests of the northern latitudes burning to the ground is climate engineering. And when those forests burn to the ground, it adds a tremendous amount of CO2 to the air. So when people say CO2 is not a problem, then they're saying climate engineering is not a problem at the same time. And that's simply not reality. So again, we need to look at the whole bigger picture. And then as that feedback loop continues of climate engineering causing the forest to burn down, not the only cause, but mathematically, I believe, inarguably the greatest single cause, then that soot lands on ice. I just publicized an article on that. The ice is black now, not white. The albedo of the ice is greatly diminished. The ice absorbs thermal energy instead of reflecting it. Now the ice is melting faster. Now there's more heat. Now there's more methane. These loops continue to feed themselves. And so many of these roads lead right back to climate engineering, not as an only cause, but a primary cause. So one more important story from a few days ago, and this should wake anybody up that's willing, is from MIT, one of the world's foremost researchers, stating on the current trajectory, within 10 years, 1 out of 2 children will have autism. 1 out of 2 children. And that doesn't mean that the child that's not diagnosed is well. There's no chance that child could be well. No chance. Just because they don't have a diagnosis diagnosis of autism doesn't mean that they're healthy, nor the rest of us. All of us are breathing this stuff in. We're all being contaminated, no matter what. No matter what else people don't agree on, they should agree that we are all being poisoned. We're not going to be thinking clearly much longer if these programs continue. We have a fight on our hands. So with that note of sincere concern that I hope mobilizes many people, Russ, let's open up the phone lines first, and then we'll continue our dialogue.
Absolutely. We do have the phone lines open for those who want to call in. Please call this number at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. And when you do call, please try to mute your phone or keep it quiet so we don't have your noise leaking over on the air. But, Dane, I wanted to add a couple things to what you say. You talk about activists making an appearance once a year. You know, I would much prefer people do 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, than once a year or twice a year at a big event, because that 5 minutes a day, you're going to make so much more of an impact. It needs to happen every day. This is the largest crime against humanity in human history, and we really need to have that kind of an impact. I also want to say, let me get rid of that background noise. I also want to say, you talk about forest fires. I think I'm a big believer in making this personal to people. You talk about mathematically, the forest fires, the biggest single cause is the geoengineering. Let's make this personal. How many homes have been destroyed by these fires that could have been averted if it wasn't for geoengineering? How many people are having their whole lifestyle change and having tremendous personal loss as a direct result, not to mention the health impacts and the plant impacts. But anyway, with that, Dane, people call in. I've given you the number, 718-717-8296, and we're here to take your call.
Here's Russ on the fires again, and I've spent much of my life in the forest, and I manage the forest lands around me. I have in the past with great effort. And you hear people saying, I hear it all the time, the forests are burning down because of those damn environmentalists that are not letting us log the forest, or some such statement like that. And that is the most programmed, false, propagandistic statement I can imagine. That's a statement from a person who's not thinking for themselves, and I'm not denying that the forests, in certain cases, the undergrowth should be managed, but guess why that undergrowth is there? Because of irresponsible logging. In many, many cases, because they take out the overstory, the trees that were blocking out the sun to the brush below. You look at an untouched forest, and there's typically no or a smaller fuel ladder. Fuel ladder is what allows those base fuels to reach the canopy. But once you take that canopy off, they take the big prevalent trees, sun comes in, changes the whole composition of the forest, fuel ladder expands, and now we have a disrupted forest. But much, much bigger factor than any of that is simply the fact that so many forests are not getting rain. The rain they get is toxic. The sun is burning the hell out of the foliage. The temperatures are going through the roof, so the pests, the beetles, are chewing away year-round. So much of this leads back to climate engineering. But even on that note, again, it's not the only factor. People need to understand that. I mean, when you're burning something, doesn't matter whether it's coal or forest, you have something going into the sky. And this doesn't mean I'm for carbon taxes or any of that. I mean, all that is nonsense, and all that's part of saddling the people with yet more problems so they can't see the bigger picture. And it's just like taxing the people on any basis. The tax structure is to saddle the people with debt so that they can barely keep their head above the waterline. When meantime the central banks are printing everything they want, So a lot of these smoke and mirrors taxation elements are simply to keep the population struggling. But that being said, there again is much more to all these equations than many people want to admit to or want to focus on, study about. They want to take a certain theme, a certain headline, and run with it. So back to the original statement of those who say the forests are burning down because the environmentalists aren't allowing logging to occur or something. It's those kind of sort of mindless statements that people make with very high bias that are not helping our cause. It polarizes people. It keeps them from looking at the true factors. And I can say firsthand, for my forest here, that has had the entire lower fuel ladder taken out, still burnt like it's soaked with napalm because of climate engineering. So the fire volatility had virtually nothing to do with what so many people like to rant and rave about. And I'm speaking from the horse's mouth here on that point. So with that as an example, with so many other issues, I just, at this critical time when there's so much division in so many arenas, on so many subjects and with so many people, everybody needs to think for themselves. Everybody needs to connect the dots for themselves, get rid of your bias, look through a clear lens. Don't look through a fogged or clouded or colored lens. Look through a clear lens. And
Dane,
that's important for all of us. Yeah.
And we've got some callers stacking up, but would you like to take some now?
Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
All right, caller with your number that ends in 08. You're on with us. Welcome. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, guys. This is Corey. How was your morning?
Good, Corey. How are you?
Hi, Corey.
Good. I have two observations. I just wanted to call in and actually one question. First of all, we all watched Hurricane Odile. And Arizona, which state I'm in, we had forecast nonstop saying that, we were going to get the torrential flooding and so forth. And I watched, and I could see on the leading edge as the clouds came up, they were trailed. Nothing happened here. I think they steered it to our east. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about was doing your interview with David Pacman this week. A lot of people did go in and make comments, and they were just attacked right and left. And I keep telling people, just put in one intelligent comment with some facts, and then get out. Don't roll with the shills and the trolls, and give them entertainment. Then the third thing, my question, I don't understand this, Dane. When I look at the satellite map and I see California and the coast, you see a heavy cloud bank, and then almost as if there's a wall at the coastline, it stops. And I'm curious how that happened.
I see exactly, I'll go in reverse order here, because I see exactly the same phenomenon. We also see in the morning, as the radar images are becoming more pronounced, we see almost a speckled pattern over the inland west when there's no visible clouds overhead. So what's causing that refraction, that reflection? So it's, I believe, a sign of the particulates that are already in the air. And this coastline barrier that I've seen on radar as well, we see some of that quote-unquote marine layer there that's right off the California coast or right butted up to the coast when there's virtually no moisture on the water vapor image. So what is that particulate matter? If there's not enough moisture to really cause a marine layer, what is that? And I think that's a question. There's a lot of sick people on the coast, a lot of sick trees on the coast, and whatever they're using to make some of that marine layer and keep that boundary right at the coast, I think we know some of the elements involved, but it's certainly not natural. And I've spent a lot of time in the ocean, a lot, and it's anything but normal there. And even the mist or the overcast that comes in is almost a dry fog sometimes on the ocean. I think maybe we'll get a call from somebody on the coast that can elaborate on that a little bit more. But I've seen exactly what you've seen, Corey. In regards to Pacman, David Pacman is a disinformation piece for the power structure. People can watch that interview. It's posted underneath disinformation on the homepage of GeoEngineering Watch. But that was the fact that he took the time to try to go after this issue indicates that we are gaining ground, and the amount of people he has that are there to hammer anybody who posts anything on his blog, that's pretty evident if people look at those comments why those people are there. But if you listen and look at what Pacman actually said, he didn't really say much that mattered. His research amounted to going to an airport, watching some trails, and deciding that it was just the wind blowing him in that particular pattern, and kept saying we don't have any, there's no proof that there's anything going on. Wouldn't listen to lab tests that we have film of it happening. Wouldn't listen to anything, and this is typical for the power structure disinformation hitmen, and that's what Pacman is. So it's hard to refuse. It doesn't look good to refuse this type of encounter, so I didn't refuse it. At the same time, I believe that no matter how much he tried to spin it a certain way, I would bet there's a lot of people that watch his show that are now scratching their heads about our issue. So I'm going to consider it a step forward, no matter how hostile he was in that interview. In regard to the hurricane moisture that went toward you guys, yes, I think the amount of headlines they gave this was going to happen, but then it didn't. Perhaps is that a demonstration of climate engineering, what they can do or what disasters maybe they can avert? Maybe there's people within the Arizona legislatures and so forth that are starting to wonder about this issue, and maybe this is a shot across their bow. You know, we can make or break you anytime we want, just like the hurricane that just went toward Hawaii that was disintegrated right before it made landfall. There's a lot of shots across the bow going on, if you will, I think, Corey, but the kind of disintegration of that moisture that you just saw in Arizona, it's all that happens in California. They blow it apart again and again.
Yeah. Well, it was really obvious because it was heavy. You know, I mean, it was another one of those record-breaking hurricanes. I mean, the pictures from Cabo San Lucas are terrible. And then the other thing I read about the football field at Texas A&M, they had a storm. I think it brought like 4 inches. They played. It ruined their side. This week, getting ready for another game, they're bringing in something like 23, 27 refrigerated truckloads of sod, $300,000 to replace that field. So, you know, I'm also bringing that to people. When municipalities, counties, institutions, you know, really start registering the hit that they're taking, I hope that they'll also, you know, start listening to us and waking up.
Well, what an example, you know, is this ancient Rome that, to hell with the fact that the whole planet's being torn apart, let's just make sure that game goes off so we can all have a day in the Coliseum. I mean, we're all arranging deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. For that kind of effort and resource and energy to be put into something like a football game is a pretty sad statement in my mind.
It
the
is.
State of our society. Very sad.
It is.
It's not going to continue much longer. It's not going to continue much longer. I mean, we're at the point where the shelves are going to be emptied out, and that's when the fun is really going to start.
You know, I would add to what Corey was talking about with the haze, what you both were talking about, is what's amazing to me is I go out and I can feel that there's very low moisture in the air, yet there's a haze in the air, and you can see this haze. The other thing is around streetlights at night, it's very apparent. You have these very dry nights, and you look up and you've got this massive haze around the streetlights, yet there's very little moisture in the air. It's completely disproportional to what it should be. And I recognize this because I've always paid attention to these little things because they've always been interesting to me. You know, with the Pacman interview, too, I would also add, it's amazing when you start learning, because over time I've learned a little bit about how these people and politicians use neuro-linguistic programming. And Pacman is doing the same kinds of things. And it's so it begins to become easier to recognize these mainstream disinformants who work for the establishment, because they start saying that things that Dane says are claims. Instead of saying information, evidence, what you're bringing forward, or looking at real evidence, they use these real degrading words. Like, you're not making statements, you're making claims. And that's one they use all the time, because claim is a very weak word. It's something that doesn't carry a lot of psychological weight. So Pacman, I watched that whole interview, and it was just amazing. That it was like what Jesse Ventura did. There's no evidence, there's no real information talked about. It's just trying to make people feel like it's not happening with no evidence.
Well, I think that people, though, in this particular case, if they watch that interview, and I hope people do, that no matter what Pacman did, there were facts presented that were not claims, quote, statistical lab tests, so forth. And I believe that there were probably plenty of people that frequent his shows that are scratching their heads about this issue now. So, you know, sometimes those kind of conversations can't be avoided, and they need to be engaged in. So I think still the overall exposure, even from that kind of bout, will help our cause. And this is interesting also in that Pacman interview. Corey, if you saw this as well, Pacman insisted repeatedly on using the term chemtrails. Mm-hmm. And that should be a big red flag for people as well. I mean, to the point where he had stopped and said, okay, can we call it perceived chemtrails? He would not touch the climate science terms. And I stress that to people. Again, I'm not phobic about the chemtrails term, but it does not help the credibility of our cause.
And Dane, doesn't even show evidence that he's trained to do that? he knows exactly what he's doing.
Absolutely. Same thing with Congressman Lamalfa. Same thing in my confrontation with him or encounter with him 2 separate times in the last 45 days. He went straight to the chemtrails term over and over. That's what they're trained to do. That's the term that's been marginalized. That's the term that they want us to use. And yet we have so many people in our own movement who insist on using only that term. And again, I'm not phobic about it. Certainly it's more descriptive. But the bottom line is it has been set up to marginalize the cause. So it's something people should consider. And that's why, I'm saying watch the interview. Decide for yourself. Don't believe me. Think about it. And people need to get past all their biases in every direction and not knee-jerk every time something's said or a headline comes out or, stop, think, and grab. You start marching out into the forest.
It's amazing, the use of social pressure. This is one thing that when a society becomes a society of followers, social pressure becomes very effective. And we have all of these people like Pacman who are using social pressure, and you have other talking heads. I mean, they all do this, who are all trained to do this. They will make a disgusted face or a disconcerted face or all of these little clues because they know that that's how humans pick up on clues as to what they should believe or what they shouldn't believe, what has credibility and what doesn't, when they're listening to their emotions rather than looking at information in data. We have, soil samples are not as effective, but water samples on the ground, we have so much other evidence. We have the die-offs, the insect population, and yet these people are not even touching this. They don't even want to go there, and that should be a warning sign for people as well, I think.
It should. Those are all valid points for us, extremely valid points. Corey, thanks for everything you brought up. Thanks for everything you're doing for the cause, and I can say, knowing Corey for some time now, that very grateful for her level-headedness, her constant contribution to this fight. So my most sincere gratitude to you, Corey.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Corey, you too. Thank you. Thank you for calling. And for some reason, we just lost all of our callers that were calling in and waiting. So anybody who wants to call in, please fill our queue back up because our queue just got dropped for some reason. So
we've had a lot of interesting things happen. I've had having a lot of email issues, things that don't go out, things that don't come in. Certainly we know when the counters that don't work. In fact, Russ, the figures you shared with me and the page you set up with the YouTube on it to try to check how well the counter was actually working. I believe what you told me was there was about 40,000 visits to the page and 1,100 registered on YouTube. Is that about right?
That's right. It's right. I actually have a page where I embedded the video, which should be counted towards the counts of YouTube views. And that particular video, and I've had it on my site for a while, had 40,000 hits that were, and these are unique hits. Our system actually counts unique visitors, not repeat visitors, but unique visitors every 24-hour period. And YouTube was showing only just under 1,200 hits to the video when we were showing 40,000 views of the page hosting the embedded video. So the discrepancy is just enormous. And Dane, that's another use of social pressure. If people look at the view count of a YouTube video and they see it very low, they feel like it's not important, it's not something people are looking at. It's just like a restaurant. If you want to bring customers into your restaurant, park cars in the parking lot. That brings more people into the restaurant. And this is the same thing, is that people gravitate they tend to give credibility where other people are hanging out if they're not using their discernment, if they're just being emotionally based, just feeling the situation out emotionally rather than looking at information. And so, so they're making these counters small. We do have another caller who called in.
Those are great points you bring up, though, Russ. Those are excellent points, and that's exactly why they control the whole system. So people, again, they need to look past that and not be thrown off by the type of manipulation that's going on. So anyway, we'll take that caller, Russ, if you're good.
Yes, caller with your number that ends in 59. Welcome. Who are we speaking with?
Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well. I was wondering if you folks had any insight, I don't know that you do, about why are they droughting out California and flooding, why are they manipulating the weather in such a way? Do you have any insights to the rhyme or reason?
Yeah, I've elaborated on that on a number of presentations, and I would offer a number of reasons for that. One, we've seen since 2007, we've seen the Kelvin wave, which is the beginning of El Nino, suppressed Now that's just to push the warm water. It changes the trade winds and pushes the warm water back toward the western Pacific and keeps it bottled up in the ocean. So the high pressure zones over California and the U.S. West help to alter those trade winds and push that warm water back and hide it in the ocean. That's one reason. Two, what they're doing in California appears to be connected to what they're trying to do in the Arctic. Every time for the last 7 years that we see bad news come from the Arctic, not Antarctica, but the Arctic, there's a serious ice regression. We see immediately the 4 or 5 week forecast in California change to scalding heat and high pressure as they keep this high pressure dome over us. I'll give you an example of last winter's train of snowstorms, quote unquote winter snowstorms that are completely engineered. High pressure over California spins clockwise like a wheel. So that pumps the jet stream north through Alaska. Alaska's had its warmest January on record, a lot of other warm months with it. Then they pump that back south, because keep in mind it's spinning around that clockwise rotation, pumps that colder air back down to the eastern U.S., cools the eastern U.S., confuses a lot of people who live in the eastern
Is that what it is? It's the confusion. It's the cold people in the cold east saying, no, it's not warming.
Correct.
And folks out on the west saying, yes, it is warming, and it's okay.
In the west, it's hotter than hell. Now, let me carry it further, too. Now, these are certain aspects that make California, at minimum, a climate sacrifice zone. But I would carry that ball further. California, I do believe, is absolutely a target. So as the walls close in the power structure, in addition to, there's always many layers to this. There's never a this or that answer. Too many people want to find a this or that. There's a whole lot of answers to most of these questions. But as they completely decimate California's ability to produce food, pretty soon people are going to turn their taps on, there's nothing going to come out. Now you have a population that's waking up to the power structure crimes, but is so mired in their day-to-day struggle for life that they can't really make any meaningful stand against that power structure criminality. So the power structure is accomplishing a whole lot at once, and there's always a lot of answers to these questions. So California, I believe, is in certain instances a climate, or certain aspects, a climate sacrifice zone, but it also is a target at this point. I mean, we see moisture even coming from the east now, which is happening more than it historically has, but even that moisture, as Corey just mentioned, is blown apart. They will not let these systems precipitate, so they are making sure that the rainfall is scaled back here. So a lot of reasons, a lot of answers to that question, none of them good, none of them benevolent, none of them in our favor.
Now, this is Mr. Wigington?
Yes, Ms. Dane.
You reside in California, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is your home front away from the fires?
As of a week and a half ago, we had one approaching us, and frankly surprised they got it out. I mean, the trees were exploding like they were soaked in napalm, and they had the huge 4-engine jets bombing it. And right now, where I live, we are about 220 inches of rain short for 7 years. 220. And it's astounding. When moisture moves across us, they aerosolize it. You can hear, where I live, it's very quiet. I'm in the middle of the wilderness, and all you can hear is aircraft. I've heard 60 aircraft in an hour. It's like living at the end of an LAX runway. When moisture's moving across us, all you can hear is jets. They're right above the clouds. They're aerosolizing, so the moisture cannot fall. It's an all-out attack. It's nothing short of an all-out attack. And a very sobering experience I had on December 21st, 2012. There was an engineered snowstorm, and we went from, something in the 50-degree range to a nucleated snow. It started snowing at the 40s, heavy, wet, chemically nucleated snow. And I remember that night very well because it was so trying to one's soul. And all I could hear was these aircraft flying over, these heavy, wet concrete flakes floating down, and all I could hear was trees crashing to the ground in the forest. It decimated the forest. 300-400-year-old trees that had stood through so many storms that were 3 or 4 times more depth, but not this type of chemically nucleated snow. The roots are weakened from the bioavailable metals, so the trees don't have the grip on the ground they used to have. And I just remember the utter angst of that night where, again, those are the only 2 sounds I could hear, is aircraft flying over and trees crashing in the forest. And it's hard to hear that.
It's like you said, it's like an attack. It's almost like a war.
It is an attack. I mean, I remember that night as just a feeling that all all I wanted to do was somehow find a way to put a hole in the armor for these people to shine the light on them. I mean, it's every single tree is matters, and these hundreds of years old trees, and this is again nothing short of an all-out attack against us and the biosphere. So people need to see it that way.
Now, is this anywhere near the redwoods?
I'm on the there's fires all over, but I'm on the east side of Lake Shasta in Northern California.
Okay.
And again, this is some pretty pristine wilderness. We have, or was, I should say, we have fir trees here. Some still left standing, some still alive, with 80 to 90 inch thick trunks. I mean, these things look like redwood. They're gigantic because of the historical weather here. There's a lot of rain here in this particular area. There was. So, and the forest has virtually gone silent. There's almost no birds at all. There's no berries to eat. I don't see bears anymore. I used to have bears in the yards. We're not seeing any turkeys. I mean, the forest has virtually gone silent in the last several years. No tree frogs at all. We're hitting the wall. People need to understand the gravity of our situation. That's why, going back to like the Global March, encourage people to show up, encourage them to make that day count, but at the same time, as Russ stated, X amount of time.
It's an everyday battle. Right.
Exactly.
And we need to make it personal, too. I mean, anyone who's an American, and this applies to all countries, really, but as far as California goes, that is part of our economy. And when you destroy California, you're destroying a huge part of our U.S. economy that is so valuable in our agriculture. This is really very personal. Besides,
what is it? It's like the seventh in the world, the ecology.
Seventh or eighth, depending on the study you look at.
Right.
And again, in addition to destroy any economic consideration, when the planet doesn't support life anymore, economic anything doesn't matter. And these forests are going up in smoke, and that smoke is drifting in many cases as far north as Greenland. From some of the fires in Alaska, again, in Canada, 600% of the forest that normally goes up in flames went up this year. Siberia is losing 100 million acres a year. This is settling down in the ice, as I mentioned. It's causing the ice to melt. There's so many other
effects. And the black ice, right? And the black ice from the fire. Right.
Correct. So the planet is in a extremely rapid descent into a state where it will not support life. That's how serious our situation is. So people need to get in this fight. They need to get in the fight now, every day. But appreciate the question.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Dane. And what was the other folks' name? What was the other guy's name?
It's Russ Tanner with Global Skywatch. Russ has one of the biggest sites with people participating in this cause, and Russ one of the most helpful and stable and reasonable people I've ever met. So he's a great guy.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. If you'd like to call in, please call 718-717-8296. A few minutes ago, we lost all our callers, so we've got spaces open for you to call in, 718-717-8296. And Dane, you heard about the geophosphate connection with Alzheimer's and aluminum recently. Have you heard about all that that's going on with that?
Yeah, we posted on that. That's just where, again, that researcher connected the rise in autism to reach 1 in 2 in the next 10 years. So yeah, we did post that article as well. And you start putting all these components together, all these various toxins, the various heavy metals. Humanity has made itself a truly lethal nest to live in, and if we don't do something about it quick, we're not going to be alive that long.
And we have people reporting all over the burns, the chemical burns in the leaves. You mentioned that earlier about how there were burns. I've seen these for years. After a hard night of spraying, we'll come out the next day and there'll be burns. It looks like somebody went around and sprayed acid on the leaves of all the plants.
Exactly.
And it's everywhere. It's all across the yard, just everywhere. And this is being reported around the globe. And nobody's ever seen such widespread, such a phenomenon so widespread like this before ever that I have any knowledge of.
They haven't. And the earliest artificial ice nucleation patents that we found are from 1950. So they've been at this at least 64 years. So who knows what sort of constituents they're using in these sprays right now, but they do not care about the toxicity, about the long-term ramifications. This is simply a go for broke. Now will be total if we continue down this road much longer.
Yeah, and when you consider Public Law 105-85, which enables or allows, even though it's illegal in other venues, which allows testing on the public for virtually any reason, even if it destroys the environment. It specifically says that in its law. If it destroys the environment or kills life, including humans, it's permissible according to this law. Caller with your phone number that ends in 40. Welcome. Who are we speaking with?
It's Steve from Alaska, guys.
Hey, Steve.
How are you?
Good. I just wanted to say that I think the people of Weed, California, need to join forces and use the video of the satellite loop that was on your site to sue. They clearly aerosoled these storms. These thunderstorms would have went right over their town and would have stopped this thing or prevented it. So I really think they need to use that video you have and fight this thing. They lost their town. Their town burned to the ground. It's devastating.
You know, you bring up a good point, Steve, and I hope, and I know people there. In fact, there's some really, really intelligent, grounded activists there. Lana Javant is in that area. I hope I pronounced her name right. She's really, really helpful to the cause, and
I've seen her name
she visibly.
before, yeah.
So anyway, you know, maybe something like that might be able to be initiated if there was enough support. You know, it's interesting. I spoke in front of, even when there's a direct cause and effect, and that effect is hurting the people that you're actually communicating with and trying to get to understand the climate engineering issue. I spoke in front of a CARB, California Air Resources Board, with a room full of farmers present, and these farmers were being forced to buy new equipment to emit less particulate matter into the atmosphere, equipment which they can't afford and which is breaking them. And I cornered the CARB board, the entire board, as to, I had them admit on the record right there that they completely ignore the climate engineering issue because it's not in their jurisdiction. And then I pointed out to this room full of farmers that, so here you have a board that's ignoring a source of particulate matter in the atmosphere that's 100,000 times greater or more than anything all your equipment could put out, and yet they're ignoring that issue and putting the entire burden on your back. Is that what you want? And I saw no reaction from these farmers. They couldn't seem to rise to the occasion and realize they were being made the scapegoat for these climate engineering programs. And so I hope people wake up from this stupor that some are in, that they don't seem to want to face this challenge. And I hope to God that changes soon, because
that video of that satellite loop over the eastern Pacific there, right off California, it's undeniable. You could clearly see that they were aerosoling right over the tops of these storms that were forming. And
yeah, that was on the HARP report. From the HARP report, you mean?
Yeah. It was a few days ago you put that on. I think that loop was from September 11th.
It was, but that was from the HARP report. My thanks to them. He's done a great job.
He is good. He really is. He really is good. But the video or the loop itself is very convincing. I mean, it's proof.
100% feeding it right in, and it's hard to ignore that. And that's why when we get people like Bachman or Congressman Lamalfa saying we don't have any proof. And by the way, the most recent communication with the congressional reps from Congressman Lamalfa's office, astounding their change in position. They were all over this issue at one point. I used to get calls at home from the reps on a weekend ranting about the skies being sprayed. They've obviously been told to leave this issue alone, and now an activist I know that was there 2 days ago had a 3-hour conversation with these reps. Total stonewall. The reps making the statement that the reason bark is being burned off of trees is not the UV's high, is there must be a car parked somewhere nearby and the sun is reflecting off the windshield and burning the bark off the trees. Or, completely ludicrous statements, and just a total lack of willingness to stand their ground. They've been told to shut up, apparently, and that's exactly what they're doing.
They're scared to death. They'll lose their pension. They might lose their life if they go the other way. So
it's like, I equate this to like being on the Titanic and hiding in your cabin while the whole ship goes down. What good is that going to do you, to hide in there with all your possessions while the whole ship goes to the bottom?
I don't understand it.
Exactly.
I just wanted to mention, too, that I've been getting on radio shows, and I urge people to do this. even if you don't think you can do it, if you're nervous, take some notes or make some notes before you call, and call your local radio shows and bring this issue up and use the proper terms. I did this on a show in Anchorage just yesterday, and I got about 10 or 12 minutes on the radio with this guy, and he tried to tear me down. He tried to make me look like a fool, but I was able to get the website out and get the information out, and eventually I started talking about dying trees and the Air Force doing this, and they cut me off. But I did get my time on, and I feel like I did a really good job. So I urge people to call.
Yeah, that was very
moving the ball
valuable.
forward, Steve. I mean, I got your message on that, and that kind of moving the ball forward is so important to do every single day. That kind of assertive action on your part matters, and if everybody was doing that, ringing radio stations around the country with a few key statements they want to make while they have that one moment, so that they're on target, that would matter so much.
You talk about being active 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week. To be honest, I'm active in this 10 hours a day, 7 days, well, at least 5 days a week. I mean, every day, all day, I'm in action. I'm approaching people. I'm giving them flyers. I'm giving them just the website on a piece of paper. I mean, all day long, every day. We all have to do this.
So your attitude's right, because again, let's go back to the Titanic. If the ship is sinking, do you say, well, I'm going to go down for 5 minutes and see if I can plug that hole, but then I'm going to come back on the ship and on the deck and play some shuffleboard for a few hours? Is that what you do? No. You continue to try to plug that leak until it's plugged, or you're going to go down, and that's exactly what we face. So people need to keep those analogies in mind. And
we got that's so true. And we have an onslaught of callers. I'd love to try to get a couple more in.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for all you're doing, amigo. You're a stellar example to what we need people to do.
Thank you.
Yes, Steve, thank you so much. I think about Steve a lot. I appreciate what he's doing. And
great.
To make a quick comment about your the farmers being forced to buy equipment with less particulates. Two purposes I see in that. It puts pressure on agriculture, which further destroys, which is in the globalist interest at this point. And the other thing that people don't think about is it provides social disinformation. People have a hard time understanding. Look at how the government is trying so hard to protect the environment. Why would they be spraying? It doesn't make any sense. It's because part of the purpose of promoting their goodness in trying to clean up the environment is to make it hard for people to believe they would do anything other than that.
But again, I agree with you completely. If people would look at the bigger picture, though, they would see right through that facade. I mean, was the government trying to protect the environment when they sprayed Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico for the Macondo oil leak and in the attempt to hide that oil instead of trying to clean it up? I mean, that chemical made, by some environmental impact reports, that situation 52 times more toxic. But that's what the government did, because they don't give a damn about anything but public perception, hiding the oil, even if it killed the Gulf of Mexico. So, again, people need to think for themselves when they say, why would they do this? There's a million reasons why we can look past that.
Right, and not to underestimate the social impact. The social impact of promoting themselves as doing good. Caller with your phone number that ends in 22. Welcome. Who are we speaking with?
Yes, hi. My name's Alan from Hawaii.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Alan.
Hi. Yeah, just to confirm, I heard on the AM radio yesterday, the hottest September on record in over a decade. The average temperatures that they're recording is 90 degrees. Last year was 87.
Now you're talking about August or September, because we're not quite done with September. We just had the warmest August on record, and we had the warmest summer on record. I agree with you. Are they reporting the warmest? Go ahead.
They're reporting warmest temperatures as well as warmest water surface temperature as well.
Correct. Warmest global ocean temperatures, all the above. When you said the warmest September on record, I wasn't sure because September's not over yet.
Right. Well, maybe they just calculated the first part of September.
Okay, that could be. That could be, and I don't doubt that fact. So that makes sense. And this is what people need to look at. When you see these headlines that, 10,000 scientists say that, this isn't happening, look past the headline and look for any data behind it. Look, they don't state that any statistics like you're talking about, which are valid and not disputed. You see some glaring headline making some outlandish statement with nothing to back it up. People need to look past that and decide who would want you to think the planet's cool. The climate engineers, the fossil fuel industry, think about it. It's not about Al Gore. It's about facts. So what you're saying is true. I don't doubt September is heading along the same track. That's why they've tried so hard to push El Nino back, even if it fries the hell out of the U.S. West. They don't care. They're simply trying to cover things up as long as they can, just like they did in the Gulf of Mexico with the correction. So any data you have on that, any articles, feel free to send them if you think we haven't seen them yet, Alan.
Absolutely. And I just have one comment, and I really want to thank you for your past 2 videos regarding the spraying. One plane where the nozzles were in the middle, as well as the turning on and off with the other airplane having no contrail and them almost colliding. Those videos are really helpful for me because, I mean, we can talk about all the consequences of these programs, but to create awareness, the number one thing I keep getting challenged with is that they're just contrails, and it drives me absolutely crazy. So any video that targets to debunk that they're just contrails and they're actually geoengineering aerosols would be...
We'll keep posting, and I want to give that thanks to the activists that diligently search the skies to help provide those. My thanks goes to them, and it's all of us working together that matters. So, we'll try to keep that conduit going so we can expose that kind of video. And again, my thanks to the activists that help provide that. Thanks for the update from across the water, though.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate that call. I've lived in the busiest airspaces in the United States, near Washington, D.C., and I grew up in Florida, just north of Tampa, seen untold thousands upon thousands of jets. You can never look up without seeing a jet in the sky. Never once have I seen a trail come out of a high bypass turbofan. Never. If we ever had seen one, we would have thought there was a very serious issue with the engine. Caller with your phone number that ends in 11, welcome to the show. Who are we speaking with?
I guess that's me. My name is
Phone number that ends in 11. You're with us. You're live. Who are we speaking with? Caller, can you hear me? There you are. That's you. Caller?
I heard Leslie for a minute, and then we lost her.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple people here in the queue. Caller, one last time. Your phone number ends in 11. If you're waiting in the queue to speak, just speak up, and I'll tell you who we got here. Okay, we got somebody who's really shy, I guess. So, caller phone number that ends in 48. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, this is BJ. Hi, guys.
Hi, BJ. How are you?
I'm okay. Boy, so many shows are just being messed with. It's incredible because I listen to it, all the time. But what's worrying me, what are they putting in it now with the Ebola over there in Africa? And then when they talk about some sickness that all these kids, hundreds and hundreds of kids going to the ER, and it was in, I think, 10 or 11 states. When they showed the map, it was smack in the middle. All the states were grouped in the middle, and all the states around the outside weren't, showing a big amount of this illness. And I'm thinking, that's really weird. I mean, as much as people travel and fly and blah, blah, smack in the middle was like a red blob of those 10 states. And
there's undoubtedly a lot of biological experimentation going on right now. Again, the power structure's being backed into a corner. They're more dangerous than ever. In regards to Ebola, the original, I first read and studied a bit about Ebola 30 years ago, and it was felt that the Marburg and Ebola viruses came from Kidam Cave in Africa. They just give some reason to make it seem natural, but these all seem to be linked to experimental pathogens, BJ, as I think you're speculating, and I think you're right.
Well, we're down to the last. We're down to the very end of our show. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of our callers, but this is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of Dane Wigington and Greg Palin. We're here every Saturday at 12 noon at UCY.TV, 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, UCY.TV. Join us for GeoEngineering Watch Radio every Saturday afternoon. We will see you next week. I'm sorry, callers, we didn't get to you. We'll get to you next week. Take care.
Thank you, fellas.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Just wanna see